Imagine a world without search engines, a world without instant answers, but a world where knowledge was a guarded treasure and wit was a sharp and necessary tool. In that world, a good riddle wasn't just a party trick. It was a test of intelligence, a form of entertainment, and a way of looking at the world sideways. People in the medieval period, from farmers to monks, loved riddles. They saw them as more than just puzzles. They were compact poems that gave a voice to the voiceless, making a shield, a plow, or even a bookworm speak its own truth. Most of the best surviving Old English riddles come from a single extraordinary book. It's called the Exeter Book. This manuscript, created sometime in the late 10th century, is one of only four major books of Old English poetry to survive. It was given to Exeter Cathedral by its first bishop, Leofric, around 1072, where it has remained ever since. It survived the Norman Conquest, the Reformation, and even a bombing raid in World War II. Inside its vellum pages are elegies, religious poems, and nearly 100 riddles. Their authors are anonymous. Their solutions are not written down, and we are left, 1,000 years later, to solve them ourselves. These aren't simple knock-knock jokes. They are sophisticated, metaphorical, and sometimes deliberately misleading. They show us how medieval people saw their world, not as a collection of static objects, but as a place full of active, living things, each with its own story. They force us to forget our modern categories and think with a different kind of logic. So, what if the key to understanding a lost world wasn't in its chronicles of kings and battles, but in its jokes and puzzles? What secrets are hiding in plain sight, disguised as simple word games? Number 20. What feeds on words but remains unwise? I was a thief in the dark, and I devoured the great man's speech, the strong man's song, the foundations of knowledge. But I was no wiser for the words I swallowed. Take a moment. The clues are all there. Well, a thief that eats words but learns nothing. It's a creature that exists in a world of books, a world of precious, handwritten knowledge. In a monastery scriptorium where a single book could take years to create and be worth more than a house, this little thief was a constant threat. The answer is a bookworm, or more accurately, a moth larva. This riddle is one of the most famous from the Exeter Book, Riddle 47. It's brilliant because of its deep irony. The medieval world placed immense value on the written word. Literacy was rare, a skill largely confined to the clergy. Monks would spend their lives in silence, copying texts onto vellum, which was made from stretched and treated animal skin. The ink was made from oak galls, or soot. The entire process was an act of devotion. A single Bible could require the skins of over 200 calves. The Lindisfarne Gospels, an illuminated manuscript created around 700 AD, is a masterpiece of art and faith that represents thousands of hours of labor. Into this sacred space comes a tiny, mindless insect. It chews through the vellum, destroying letters, words, sentences. It literally consumes wisdom. It eats the strong man's song, perhaps a reference to heroic poems like Beowulf, and the great man's speech, possibly meaning religious or philosophical texts. Yet the worm itself remains completely ignorant. It gets no smarter, it gains no salvation. It's just a bug. The riddle works on the tension between the highest human achievement, the preservation of knowledge, and the lowest form of biological existence. The monk who wrote this probably saw a manuscript damaged by insects and felt a mix of frustration and philosophical wonder. The scholar, Alcuin of York, an advisor to Charlemagne in the 8th century, ran the palace school and oversaw the copying of countless texts. He wrote about the importance of preserving books from the gnawing of the worms. He knew this enemy well. This riddle is a small, perfect poem about the fragility of human knowledge and the mindless, indifferent forces of decay that are always at work. It's a memento mori for the library, but if this riddle captures the quiet horror of a book's destruction, what other mundane tragedies of the scriptorium went unrecorded? How many unique texts, containing knowledge we can't even imagine, were lost forever, not to fire or war, but to a simple insect? And does our own digital knowledge, so seemingly permanent, face its own version of the bookworm, an enemy we can't yet see? Number 19, what wears a coat of iron and drinks? The earth. My nose is pointed downwards. I crawl along the ground, tearing the green earth. I am guided by a master, and my back is clothed in iron. I leave a dark trail behind me, but I bring life to the world. This isn't a monster or a mythical beast. It's a tool. a humble, essential, world-changing tool. It speaks of its work, its master, and its purpose. It is a servant to humanity, one of the most important inventions in history. The answer is a plow. This riddle, a variation of which appears in the Exeter Book, gives a voice to an object that defined medieval life. Before the 6th century, European farmers used a light wheelless ard or scratch plow. It was little more than a sharpened stick that cut a shallow furrow in the soil. It worked well enough on the light, sandy soils of the Mediterranean, but it was useless against the heavy, wet clay soils of northern Europe. Then came a revolution, the heavy moldboard plow, or karuka. This was a much more complex machine. A vertical knife to slice the sod. It had a plowshare, a horizontal blade to cut the soil underneath. And crucially, it had a moldboard, a curved metal plate that turned the soil over. This is the coat of iron the riddle mentions, turning the soil over buried weeds, improved drainage, and brought nutrients to the surface. For the first time, the fertile but difficult soils of the north could be farmed effectively. The riddle's line, "I am guided by a master," refers to the plowman, but the real power came from the team of oxen, sometimes as many as 8, needed to pull this heavy contraption. An ox team and a heavy plow were incredibly expensive. No single peasant could afford them. This technological shift, according to historians like Lynn White Jr. in his 1962 book Medieval Technology and Social Change, directly contributed to the manorial system. Peasants had to pool their resources, working communally on strips of land to use the plow. The lord of the manor often owned the plow and the ox team, further cementing his power. The riddle's perspective is fascinating. The plow describes itself as a creature, crawling and tearing. It leaves a dark trail, the freshly turned earth, but this act of violence brings life, the crops that will feed the village. It is a perfect metaphor for agriculture, a controlled disruption of nature to create sustenance. It is a voice from the heart of the medieval economy, a poem about the backbreaking labor that underpinned everything. But we know so little about the specific individuals who innovated this technology. Who were the blacksmiths who perfected the moldboard? What were the names of the farmers who first figured out how to manage an 8-ox team? And if the plow could speak of its labor, what would the scythe, the millstone, or the spinning wheel say about the world they built? Number 18. What is a warrior that fights with its belly? I am a wonder. I swell and shrink. When my lord embraces me, I am filled with wind from my belly. My own power then attacks me, driving out my breath and sending a beautiful sound through my mouth. I bring joy to men and sit at the feasts of kings. This one is a bit more complex. It speaks of being embraced, filled with wind, and then producing a beautiful sound. It's a warrior, but its fight is a joyful one. It's an object of high status found at royal feasts. It's not a weapon of war. It's a weapon of celebration. The answer is a bagpipe, or more broadly, an organ or bellows-driven instrument. The riddle describes the mechanics of the instrument perfectly. The lord is the musician. He embraces the bag, which swells as he fills it with air. The pressure from his arm then attacks the bag, forcing the wind out through the chanters and drones. The result is not violence, but music, a bowiful sound. While we often associate bagpipes with Scotland, they were common across Europe in the Middle Ages. They were loud, energetic instruments, perfect for festivals, dances, and military processions. Chaucer mentions a bagpipe in the Canterbury Tales, describing the miller as playing one when the pilgrims set off. They were instruments of the people, but also, as the riddle suggests, found in more noble settings. The bellows imagery also strongly connects to the portative organ, a small, portable keyboard instrument powered by a hand-pump bellows. These were common in religious processions and secular music from the 12th century onwards. The great composer and poet Guillaume de Machaut, who died in 1377, depicted himself surrounded by such instruments. The riddle uses the language of combat and pressure to describe the creation of art. The belly is the bag, the source of power. The attack is the pressure that creates the music. This personification is powerful. It turns a machine from making sound into a living creature that struggles and sings. It reflects a mindset that saw agency and life in crafted objects. The study of medieval music is called musicology, and it relies on scant evidence. We have manuscripts with notation, like the Carmina Burana, a collection of 254 poems, and dramatic texts from the 11th or 12th century, but we don't always know exactly what instruments were used or how they were played. The sound of a medieval feast is largely lost to us. Riddles like this are rare clues, giving us a glimpse into not just the instruments themselves, but how people thought and felt about them. They weren't just wooden leathery, they were companions, warriors of joy. But what did this music truly sound like in a stone hall, filled with people and lit by fire? How did the specific tuning systems of the time, so different from our modern scales, affect the listeners emotionally? And what other instruments, now lost to time, had their own riddles that no one thought to write down? Number 17. What is both my father and my son? I saw a strange creature. It was young in the morning, old at noon, and frozen in the evening. Its beginning was its own end, and its end was its own beginning. This riddle plays with time, transformation, and the cycles of nature. It presents a paradox, something that is its own parent and its own child. The imagery of morning, noon, and evening is a strong clue, suggesting a daily cycle of change, a process of melting and freezing. The answer is ice, water, and vapor. Let's break it down. Frozen in the evening is ice. Young in the morning could be the dew or mist vapor that appears as the sun rises. Old at noon could be the water after the ice has fully melted and been warmed by the sun. The core of the riddle is the hydrological cycle. Water the father freezes to become ice, the son. The ice, the son, then melts to become water, the father again. The vapor is part of this endless family relationship. This riddle shows a sophisticated understanding of the states of matter, long before the development of formal chemistry or physics. It's based on direct, careful observation of the natural world. For people in medieval Northern Europe, the behavior of ice was a matter of life and death. It dictated travel over rivers and lakes. The spring thaw was a time of flooding, but also of liberation. A sudden freeze could trap ships or ruin crops. The period from roughly 950 to 1250 AD is known as the medieval warm period. During this time, temperatures were relatively mild. Vikings were able to colonize Greenland, and vineyards flourished in England. But starting around 1300, Europe entered the Little Ice Age, a period of colder, more volatile weather that lasted for centuries. The first major crisis was the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, when relentless summer rains caused catastrophic crop failures. People became intimately aware of climate's power. This riddle, likely from the earlier, warmer period, is less about a threat and more about a natural wonder. It captures the magical, cyclical nature of water. The author wasn't just describing a physical process, they were exploring a philosophical concept. The idea of something being its own cause and effect, its own parent and child, touches on themes of eternity and reincarnation. It's a scientific observation wrapped in a metaphysical puzzle. It demonstrates that the medieval mind was not just preoccupied with God and kings, but also with the deep, beautiful logic of the world around them. But how much did they really understand about these processes? Did they have theories now lost about why water behaved this way? And how did the dramatic climate shift of the Little Ice Age change the way they told riddles about the weather, turning wonder into fear? Number 16. I have a single eye but cannot see. I have one foot and a hard, sharp head. I travel a long way making a path as I go, but I have only one eye, and it is blind. My work is to hold things together, but I am often lost. This riddle gives us a series of contradictions. It travels but has one foot. It has an eye but is blind. Its purpose is to join things. The clues point to a common, everyday object, so common that we barely notice it. It's something small, sharp, and essential for making clothes. The answer is a needle. The one foot is the needle itself. The hard, sharp head is the point. The blind eye is the hole at the other end, through which the thread passes. It travels a long way through the fabric, creating a path of stitches. Its job is to hold pieces of cloth together to create or mend garments. The final line, I am often lost, is a touch of realism anyone who has ever sewn can appreciate. In the medieval period, every piece of clothing was made by hand. There were no factories, no sewing machines. Tailors and seamstresses were vital artisans in every town and city. For the vast majority of people, clothes were simple, functional, and expensive. A peasant might own only one or two outfits, which they would wear until they fell apart, and then mend, and then patch, and then turn into rags. The needle was a tool of survival. Archaeological finds from Viking and Anglo-Saxon sites, like the ones at York Jorvik, have unearthed countless needles made of bone, antler, and iron. They were precious possessions. The quality of the needle determined the quality of the stitch. A fine steel needle, which became more common in the later Middle Ages, was a sign of a professional tailor. The riddle's personification is poignant. The needle is a blind worker, tirelessly creating structure and order but seeing nothing of what it makes. It's a humble servant. This reflects a broader social reality. The people who made the clothes, grew the food, and built the cathedrals were largely anonymous, their individual lives and stories lost to history. The needle, in this riddle, speaks for all of them. It is a voice for the silent, essential labor that holds society together. The sumptuary laws, first introduced in the later Middle Ages, were regulations that controlled what people of different social classes could wear. A merchant was forbidden from wearing the same luxurious fabrics or colors as a nobleman. These laws show how important clothing was as a marker of identity and status. Behind every one of those garments, from a king's ermine-trimmed robe to a serf's woolen tunic, was the simple, blind-eyed needle. But what did the act of sewing feel like for a medieval woman, mending her family's clothes by candlelight? Did she see the needle as a servant or a tyrant dictating her hours? How many innovations in textile work, in stitch types, or garment construction were made by anonymous women and never credited as inventions? And what other simple tools have a story to tell about the silent majority of the past? Number 15. What has a mouth but never speaks, and a bed but never sleeps? I have a wide mouth but no voice. I have a bed where I lie, but I never rest. I am always running, day and night. I carry great burdens to the sea, but have no strength of my own. This riddle is a classic example of personification, giving human-like features to a large natural entity. A mouth, a bed, a constant state of running. It describes a journey and a purpose. It's a powerful force of nature, central to the life of any town or city. The answer is a river. The wide mouth is the river's mouth, where it meets the sea. The bed is the riverbed, the channel it has carved in the earth. It never sleeps, and is always running, describing the constant flow of water. It carries great burdens like silt, logs, and crucially boats and barges, which were the primary means of transporting goods in the medieval era. Yet, the river itself has no strength. It is moved by gravity. For medieval civilization, rivers were everything. They were sources of drinking water, food, fish, and power for water mills that ground grain or powered forges. In major cities like London on the Thames, Paris on the Seine, and Rome on the Tiber grew up because rivers provided a strategic advantage. They were highways of commerce and arteries of communication. The chronicler William Fitzstephen, writing in the 1170s, described London as a bustling port, its river filled with ships bringing wine from France, furs from Norway, and other goods from across the known world. The riddle captures the paradox of the river. It is an active, powerful force, yet it is also passive. It serves humanity, but it is not a servant. It can be a source of life, but it can also be a source of destruction through flooding. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a collection of annals detailing English history, is filled with entries about harsh winters when the Thames froze solid and devastating floods that washed away bridges and homes. The riddle's perspective is one of awe. The river is a living thing, with its own features and behaviors. This reflects a pre-industrial relationship with nature, where the natural world was not just a resource to be exploited, but a powerful entity to be respected and understood. To personify the river was to acknowledge its agency, its character. The riddle forces us to see this familiar landscape feature through fresh eyes, as a creature with a purpose and a story. But how did medieval engineers think about managing rivers? What kind of lost knowledge did they possess about flood control or bridge building, knowledge based on centuries of local observation rather than formal science? When they looked at a river, did they see a god, a monster, a tool, or all three at once? And what are the hidden stories of the thousands of smaller, unnamed rivers that shape the lives of millions? Number 14. What builds castles of white and then melts them with a tear? I am a white warrior. I come from the sky in a silent army. I build beautiful castles and fortresses on every branch and roof. but then a single tear from a warmer eye destroys my work completely and my kingdom vanishes. This is a riddle of ephemeral beauty. It uses the language of war and architecture to describe a delicate natural process. A white warrior, a silent army, castles that are built and then destroyed. The imagery is vivid and poetic. The answer is snow and frost. The white warrior and his silent army are the snowflakes falling without a sound. Build beautiful castles and fortresses on the landscape, coating everything in a layer of white. This is a perfect description of how snow and hoarfrost can transform a familiar scene into something magical and new. The architect is nature itself. The second part of the riddle is about the inevitable end. The warmer eye is the sun. Its single tear could be the first drop of melting water, or simply the warmth of its gaze. This small act of warmth is enough to destroy the entire kingdom of snow and ice, which vanishes as if it were never there. The riddle captures the fleeting, transient nature of winter's beauty. For medieval people, snow was a dual reality. On one hand, it was beautiful, a source of wonder and play. The famous painting, The Hunters in the Snow by Peter Bruegel the Elder from 1565, late medieval, early Renaissance, but capturing a timeless winter scene shows both the hardship and the simple joys of a snow-covered landscape. On the other hand, a heavy snowfall was a serious threat. It could isolate villages for weeks, make travel impossible, and led to starvation for both livestock and people. The chronicles of the 14th century, during the Little Ice Age, are full of accounts of brutally long and snowy winters. The riddle chooses to focus on the aesthetic aspect. It's a poem about beauty, not survival. The use of military and architectural metaphors, warrior, army, castles, fortresses is interesting. It elevates the snow from a mere weather phenomenon to an active, creative force. It's as if a great, silent king arrives, builds a temporary empire, and then is defeated by his eternal enemy, the sun. This way of thinking gives drama and meaning to the changing of the seasons. It turns meteorology into mythology. The science of crystallography now tells us that no two snowflakes are exactly alike, a fact first suggested by scientist Wilson Bentley in the late 19th century. The medieval riddle maker didn't know this, of course, but they understood the intricate architectural quality of snow and frost on a macro level. They saw the art in it, but did different types of snow or ice have different meanings or personalities in medieval folklore? Were there specific spirits or entities associated with frost and blizzards that have since been forgotten? And how did the experience of a snow-covered world, so much more silent and dark than our modern one, shape the human imagination in ways we can no longer access? Number 13. What is the father of a great forest, but smaller than a flea? I am a prisoner in a wooden shell. I sleep for a long time, sometimes for a whole season. One day, I will fall to the earth. If I am lucky, I will die, and from my death a great giant will be born, with 1,000 arms that reach for the sky. This riddle is about potential. It describes a tiny object that holds immense power within it. It speaks of imprisonment, death, and rebirth. It's a paradox of scale, something incredibly small that creates something incredibly large. The answer is a seed, like an acorn. The wooden shell is the hard outer casing of the seed. It is a prisoner and sleeps through the winter, a state of dormancy. It falls to the earth from its parent tree. The crucial line is, if I am lucky, I will die. The seed must break open and cease to be a seed for the new life to emerge. Its death is the beginning of a new existence. From this death, a great giant, the tree, is born. Its 1,000 arms are the branches. The riddle connects the tiny acorn to the mighty oak forest. In the Middle Ages, forests were a vital resource, but also a place of danger and mystery. They provided wood for fuel and building, a place for pigs to forage for acorns, known as pannage, and a source of game for hunting. The royal forests of England were the king's personal property, subject to special forest laws, as detailed in documents like the 1217 Charter of the Forest. And poaching in a royal forest could be punished by mutilation or death. But forests were also seen as wild, untamed places, the home of wolves, outlaws like Robin Hood, and supernatural beings. They were the opposite of the ordered, civilized world of the village or town. The riddle taps into the awe that people felt for the forest. It explains its origin not through a dry, biological process, but through a dramatic story of death and resurrection. This concept of life coming from death was central to medieval Christian theology. The death and resurrection of Christ was the core of the faith. The riddle uses this powerful cultural idea and applies it to the natural world. The acorn becomes a tiny, natural Christ figure, sacrificing itself for a greater creation. The 12th century philosopher and abbess Hildegard of Bingen wrote extensively about the Virditas, or greening power of God, the divine force that made plants grow. She saw the life force in a simple seed as a direct expression of God's creative energy. This riddle comes from that same worldview, where science, nature, and spirituality were not separate categories. But what other natural processes did medieval people explain through these powerful metaphors of death and rebirth? Did they see the caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly in a similar light? And how much practical, forgotten knowledge did they have about forestry, about managing woodlands for long-term health, that we are only now beginning to rediscover? Number 12. What wears a single horn, but hunts no prey? I am a lone dweller, wounded by iron. I am battered by storms and covered in salt. On the shore I stand fast, holding a horn to the sky. I do not hunt, but I guide the lost and serve the great ships. This riddle creates a powerful image of a solitary, enduring figure. It sounds like a mythical creature, a unicorn of the sea, wounded and stoic. But its purpose is practical. It stands on the shore and serves ships. The clues point not to a creature, but to a structure. The answer is an anchor, or possibly a coastal beacon or lighthouse, but anchor fits the wounded by iron and lone dweller more closely when it's on a ship. Let's focus on the anchor. The riddle is clever because lone dweller can mean the anchor sitting alone on the seafloor, or the ship itself being a solitary thing at sea. The anchor is wounded by iron because it is made of iron and constantly abraded by rocks and the seabed. It's battered by storms and covered in salt, the constant condition of any nautical equipment. It stands fast on the shore, or more accurately, the seafloor, holding its horn, the flukes or arms of the anchor up. Its purpose is not to hunt, but to guide the lost by keeping them safe in a storm, and to serve the great ships by holding them in place. Medieval sea travel was a dangerous and uncertain business. Ships like the Viking longship or the later cogs used by the Hanseatic League were impressive feats of engineering, but they were vulnerable to the weather. Compasses were new, and not always trusted technology introduced to Europe around the 12th century. Sailors relied on coastal landmarks, the stars, and immense skill. A reliable anchor was a critical piece of safety equipment. Early anchors were often just large rocks tied with a rope. By the medieval period, the iron anchor with two flukes was common. The famous Bayeux Tapestry, which depicts the Norman conquest of 1066, shows anchors being used by William the Conqueror's fleet. The anchor was a symbol of stability and hope, a connection to solid ground in a world of chaos. Early Christians used the anchor as a secret symbol for the cross, representing their hope in Christ. The riddle personifies the anchor as a stoic, wounded hero. It endures punishment without complaint, performing its vital, life-saving duty in silence. It's a servant, but a noble one. This way of speaking about a tool reveals a deep respect for the object and the security it provides. It's not just a lump of metal, it's a guardian. But how were these massive anchors forged by medieval blacksmiths with their relatively simple tools? What was the real failure rate of an anchor chain or rope in a major storm? And what stories of terror and survival were witnessed by the anchors that now lie silently on the ocean floor, their ships long since rotted away? It's number 11, what has thousands of ribs and a single spine? I have a great spine, strong and long. From this spine grow thousands of ribs, thin and white. I have no lungs or heart, but I hold a universe of stories inside me. I am often bound in leather and guarded by gold. This riddle uses anatomical language to describe an inanimate object, a spine, ribs, but no organs. It contains stories and is clearly a treasured possession, bound in leather and decorated. The structure it describes is familiar to anyone who has ever held one. The answer is a book, a codex. This is a different take on the book from the bookworm riddle. That one was about the book's vulnerability. This one is about its structure and its value. The great spine is the spine of the book's binding. The thousands of ribs are the individual pages or leaves made of vellum or parchment, which were thin and often off-white. A medieval codex, unlike a modern paperback, was a complex hand-sewn object. The line, "I hold a universe of stories inside me," is the heart of the riddle. This is what makes a book more than just vellum and ink. It contains knowledge, history, poetry, and faith. The final line, bound in leather and guarded by gold, refers to the practice of creating elaborate, expensive bindings for important books. The Lindisfarne Gospels, or the Book of Kells, originally had treasure bindings decorated with gold, silver, and jewels. A book was not a disposable item. It was a treasure, an heirloom, an object of immense cultural and spiritual significance. The invention of the Codex the Book, with pages you turn, as opposed to the scroll you unroll, was a Roman innovation that became standard in the early medieval period. It was a superior technology. You could write on both sides of the page, and you could jump to any point in the text easily, which was essential for religious services and scholarship. This riddle comes from the heart of a monastic, literate culture. The person who wrote it spent their life with books, and they saw them not just as tools, but as beings with their own anatomy. The comparison to a living creature is a way of expressing reverence for the book's contents. The physical structure, the spine and ribs, is the skeleton that holds the living spirit, the stories and ideas within. This is a powerful metaphor for how knowledge is embodied in a physical object. But who were the binders who created these structures? What secret techniques did they use to sew the pages and treat the leather? How did the physical feel of a book, its weight and texture, affect the way a medieval person read and understood the text within? And what happens to our understanding of knowledge when its body becomes a weightless, invisible digital file? Number 10, what dies when it drinks? I have a red tongue and a black heart. I live in a house of stone. Give me air, and I will grow strong. Give me water, and I will die. This is a riddle of elemental opposites. It describes a powerful, living force that is sustained by one common element, air, and destroyed by another, water. The colors red and black and the house of stone are strong clues. The answer is fire. The www conversation with the black toll center is the coal or ember at its core. The house of stone is the hearth or fireplace. Fire needs air, oxygen to burn. If you blow on an ember, it will grow strong. But if you pour water on it, it is extinguished. It will die. The riddle captures the essential nature of fire in a few concise, paradoxical lines. In the medieval world, fire was the center of life. The hearth was the heart of the home, the source of heat for warmth and cooking. Without it, survival through a northern European winter was impossible. It was also a source of light in a world that was otherwise plunged into darkness after sunset. But fire was also a constant, terrifying danger. Medieval towns and cities, built largely of wood and thatch, were tinderboxes. A single stray spark could, and often did, destroy entire communities. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records numerous great fires in London, Canterbury, and other cities. The riddle treats fire as a living creature. It has a tongue, a heart, and a home. It lives, it grows, and it dies. This personification reflects the deep, ambivalent relationship people had with fire. It was both a cherished servant and a potential monster. Managing the fire in the hearth was a daily, critical task, usually performed by the women of the household. This riddle also shows a practical, observational understanding of combustion. The author knew what fed a fire and what killed it. This was not theoretical knowledge, it was lived experience. The riddle is a neat package of this essential wisdom, a way to remember and teach the fundamental properties of this powerful force. The philosopher Gaston Bachelard, in his book The Psychoanalysis of Fire, argued that fire is a primal element that sparks deep psychological responses in humans. This riddle is a 1,000-year-old piece of evidence for that claim. But what were the specific rituals or superstitions associated with tending the hearth fire? Did people speak to their fires, as this riddle does? And how did the constant presence of open flames and smoke inside their homes shape their health and their senses in ways we can no longer imagine? Number 9, what is always coming but never arrives? I am always on my way, but I am never here. All men watch for me, but no man has ever seen me. When I am spoken of, I am broken. This is a purely abstract riddle. It's not about an object or a natural force. It's about a concept. The clues are all about time, expectation, and the nature of language. It's a philosophical puzzle. The answer is tomorrow or the future. Tomorrow is always coming, but by the time it gets here, it has become today. So it never arrives. People are always looking towards the future, planning for it, worrying about it, but they can never actually experience it. We only ever live in the present moment. The final line is the cleverest. When I am spoken of, I am broken. The moment you say the word tomorrow, You are speaking from today, and the thing you are referring to remains stubbornly one day away. Or, if you speak of the future, you make it present in your speech, thus breaking its nature as something that is not yet here. This riddle reveals a sophisticated and introspective side of the medieval mind. We often think of the period as being focused on tradition, the past, and the eternal afterlife. But this riddle is about the human experience of time itself. It shows an awareness of the paradoxes of existence that feels very modern. Medieval Christian theology had a complex relationship with the future. On one hand, the ultimate future was known, the second coming of Christ and the final judgment. This was a fixed point that gave all of history its meaning. The historian and monk Bede, in his Ecclesiastical History of the English People from the 8th century, structured his narrative to show God's plan unfolding over time. On the other hand, trying to predict the immediate future through divination or astrology was considered a sin. The future belonged to God alone. This riddle exists in a more personal, psychological space. It's not about divine eschatology. It's about the feeling of waiting for a day that never seems to come. It's a universal human experience. The riddle's author has stepped back from the daily grind and is thinking about the structure of reality itself. It's a moment of pure philosophy, captured in a simple puzzle. It shows that people 1,000 years ago were asking the same fundamental questions about time and consciousness that we still ask today. But did this sense of the ever-receding future create a different kind of anxiety or hope than our modern obsession with progress? How did their concept of time, often cyclical and seasonal rather than linear, affect their daily decisions? And what other abstract concepts did they capture in riddles that have now been lost? Number 8, what has a neck without a head and a body without legs? I have a neck but no head to put on it. I have a body but no legs to stand on. I wear a cap, yet I am empty inside. I hold a sweet treasure, but I cannot taste it. This riddle paints a picture of a strange, incomplete creature. It has parts of a body but is missing others. It holds something valuable but can't enjoy it. The clues point to a man-made object, a container of some kind, likely found in a kitchen or a cellar. The answer is a bottle or a jug. The neck without a head is the neck of the bottle. The body without legs is the main part of the vessel. The cap is the stopper or cork. It is empty inside until it is filled. The sweet treasure it holds is wine, mead, or ale, which it cannot taste. This is a simple, charming riddle about a common household object. Bottles in the medieval period were made of leather called a blackjack or bombard, pottery, or, for the wealthy, glass. And glassmaking was a Roman technology that declined after the empire fell, but was revived in the Middle Ages, particularly around Venice. A glass bottle was a luxury item. The riddle gives the bottle a slightly melancholy personality. It is a passive container, a servant that holds and protects the source of joy, the wine or mead, but gets no pleasure from it itself. This is a recurring theme. In these riddles, the personified object that works for humans but is separate from the human experience. The bottle is like the needle or the plow in this respect. It has a purpose, a function, but no consciousness. This way of looking at an object is a form of empathy. The riddle writer is trying to imagine what it would be like to be a bottle. This act of imagination makes the world a richer, more interesting place. Instead of a room full of inert objects, you have a room full of characters, each with its own strange form and silent story. The contents of the bottle were, of course, central to medieval social life. And wine was the drink of the elite and of the church for the Eucharist. Ale and beer were the staple drinks for everyone else, often safer to drink than water. The production of these beverages was a major industry. The Domesday Book of 1086, a massive survey of England, lists vineyards and breweries. This little riddle about a bottle is a gateway to that entire social and economic world. But what was the life cycle of a bottle? Were they reused until they broke? How were they cleaned? And what did the world look like from the perspective of other containers, like a barrel in a ship's hold or a chest in a bedroom? Number 7, what has teeth but cannot eat? I have many teeth, but I have no mouth. I am often used in a fight with a wild beast, yet I am made of wood. My job is to separate, to order, to make smooth what is tangled. This is another riddle that plays on a single strong contradiction: teeth that don't eat. The other clues a fight with a wild beast, being made of wood, and the job of ordering and separating help narrow it down from other objects with teeth, like a saw. The answer is a comb. The teeth are the tines of the comb. It has no mouth and cannot eat. The fight with a wild beast is a wonderful metaphor for combing tangled, unruly hair. The comb, made of wood, bone, or antler, tames the wild beast of a messy head. Its job is to separate, the strands of hair and make them smooth. Combs are one of the most common finds in archaeological digs of medieval sites. They were personal, everyday items. Viking-era combs in particular are often beautifully carved and decorated. They were carried by both men and women, often in a special case. Good grooming was important. It wasn't just about vanity, it was also about hygiene, helping to control lice and other pests. The riddle elevates this mundane act of grooming into a heroic struggle. The comb is a tool of civilization, bringing order to chaos. The hair is a wild force of nature. This is a small, daily battle that everyone fought. The riddle finds a little bit of epic poetry in the simple act of running a comb through your hair. This connects to a broader medieval idea of order. The universe was seen as a divinely ordered hierarchy, the great chain of being, from God down to the angels, humans, animals, and rocks. Society was ordered into estates, those who pray the clergy, those who fight the nobility, and those who work the peasantry. Bringing order to one's own appearance, taming the wild beast of hair, was a small reflection of this larger cosmic and social order. The scholar and monk Isidore of Seville, in his Etymologies from the 7th century, a kind of encyclopedia of all knowledge, tried to classify and order every aspect of the world. This drive to categorize, to make sense of a complex reality, was a fundamental part of the medieval intellectual project. The humble comb in this riddle becomes a symbol of that project. But what were the social meanings of different hairstyles? How did a person's hair signal their status, their marital state, or their profession? And what other everyday objects were seen as tiny weapons in the constant battle to impose human order on a chaotic world? Number 6. What flies forever but never leaves its place? I am a serpent that circles the world. I have no wings, but I am always in flight. And I chase my own tail, but can never catch it. I have no beginning and no end. I am a cage that holds the world. This riddle is grand and cosmic in scale. It uses the image of a serpent, the Ouroboros, to describe something vast and inescapable. It's a paradox of movement and stillness. It flies, but stays in place. It sounds like a myth or a legend. The answer is the horizon, or, more broadly, the sky or the firmament. The serpent that circles the world is the line of the horizon. It seems to fly as you move, always staying the same distance from you. You can chase it, but you can never catch it. It has no beginning and no end. It is a continuous circle, and it acts as a cage, the boundary of our visible world. The sky fits, too, as a great dome or sphere that encloses everything. The medieval model of the universe was geocentric, based on the works of Ptolemy. They believed the Earth was a sphere, stationary at the center of the universe. Around it, in a series of nested crystalline spheres, revolved the moon, the sun, the planets, and the stars. The entire cosmos was a finite, ordered, and enclosed space. This riddle perfectly captures the feeling of living inside that model. The sky wasn't an infinite void, it was a structure, a cage. The image of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, is an ancient symbol of eternity and cycles. Its use in the riddle connects the physical observation of the horizon to a deep philosophical concept. The world is a closed loop, a self-contained system. This worldview provided a sense of stability and meaning. Everything had its proper place in the divine order. This riddle is a piece of folk cosmology. It's a poetic way of describing the fundamental structure of the world as it was understood at the time. It's not a scientific paper, it's a feeling, an experience of looking out at the world and sensing its boundaries. It shows how even the most basic features of our perception were intertwined with the era's philosophical and religious beliefs. But how did sailors, who could see the curvature of the earth every day as ships appeared over the horizon, reconcile that practical experience with these more mythic ideas? Did they have their own riddles about the horizon based on a different perspective? And what did it feel like to believe truly that the sky was a solid object just beyond the clouds? Number 5, what has one voice but 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? This is perhaps the most famous riddle in all of Western history, but its origins are ancient, not medieval. It is the riddle of the Sphinx from the Greek myth of Oedipus. Oedipus encounters the Sphinx on the road to Thebes, and she poses this riddle to all travelers. If they cannot answer, she kills them. The riddle is what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening. An Oedipus correctly answers man. A person crawls on all fours for legs as a baby the morning of life. They walk on 2 legs as an adult the noon of life, and they use a cane 3 legs in old age the evening of life. So why include an ancient Greek riddle in a list of medieval ones? Because it was absolutely known in the Middle Ages. The story of Oedipus was preserved and retold by medieval authors. The riddle itself appears in various collections and manuscripts. It was the archetype of a great riddle, a test of wisdom with life or death stakes. It was the ultimate brain teaser. For medieval thinkers, the riddle had an added layer of meaning. It wasn't just a clever puzzle about the stages of life, it was an allegory for the human condition. It described the journey of every person from helpless infancy to frail old age. It was a reminder of mortality and the passage of time. The 3 stages could also be mapped onto a Christian understanding of life, the innocence of childhood, the trials of adulthood, and the preparation for death and the afterlife. The riddle structure is a metaphor. It uses a single day, morning, noon, evening to represent an entire human lifespan. This compression of time is a powerful poetic device. It forces the listener to see their own life from a distance, as a complete arc. The fact that this ancient pagan riddle was so popular in the Christian Middle Ages shows how culture is transmitted and transformed. The story was too good, the puzzle too clever to be forgotten. It was adopted and given new layers of meaning that fit within a Christian worldview. It's a perfect example of cultural continuity across thousands of years. But how many other classical riddles and stories survived in the oral traditions of medieval Europe, never written down? Did the common people know more about ancient myths than the surviving texts suggest? And when a medieval person heard this riddle, was their first thought of the Greek myth or of their own life's journey? Number 4, what can run but has no legs? I have no legs, but I am always running. I have no mouth, but I am always murmuring. I have a source, but no end. I can be a trickle or a roar. This is a simple, elegant riddle about a natural element. It's similar to the river riddle, but the focus is different. It's less about the physical features, mouth, bed, and more about the sound and movement. The answer is water in the form of a stream or brook, or, more simply, just a running nose. Let's consider both. A stream runs but has no legs, it murmurs over rocks. Its source is a spring, but it has no end because it flows into a river, then the sea, and back into the water cycle. It can be a small trickle or a roar after a heavy rain. This is a very strong fit, but there's a tradition of slightly cheeky double entendre riddles in the Exeter Book. Some are quite bawdy. A running nose also fits the clues perfectly. It runs, but has no legs. It can murmur or gurgle. The source is the head, and it seems to have no end when you have a bad cold. It can be a trickle or a roar, a sneeze. This kind of playful ambiguity is a key feature of medieval riddling. The same words can point to a beautiful natural scene or a mundane, slightly gross bodily function. The cleverness lies in making both answers seem plausible. The scholar and abbot A. Elfric of Ensham, writing around the year 1000, composed a Latin grammar that included riddles as a teaching tool for his students. He knew that humor and wit were powerful aids to learning. This ambiguity forces the listener to think more flexibly. It's a reminder not to take things too literally. The world is a place of multiple meanings, where a single description can fit very different things. This is a form of lateral thinking, and it was a highly valued skill. So whether the answer is a beautiful stream or a snotty nose, the riddle works. It uses the simplest language to create a puzzle that is both poetic and humorous. It's a testament to the playfulness of the medieval imagination. But which answer was the original intent? Or was the ambiguity the whole point? How many other riddles operated on this kind of double meaning, with a clean answer for the polite company and a dirty answer for a laugh among friends? And does this suggest a medieval sense of humor much closer to our own than we often assume? Number 3, what is held by the left hand but never the right? I am a companion to every scribe, every scholar, every king who signs a law. I am held in the left hand, but the right hand does all the work. I am made of metal, but my purpose is to protect the softest skin. This riddle is very specific. It's about an object used in a particular activity, writing. The clue about the left and right hands is the key. It describes a division of labor between the two hands. The answer is a penknife, not for writing, but for preparing the quill. A medieval scribe wrote with a quill pen, usually made from a goose or swan feather. The tip of the quill had to be constantly sharpened and recut to maintain a fine point. This was a delicate operation. The scribe would hold the quill in their right hand, assuming they were right-handed, and the small, sharp penknife in their left. They would use the knife to trim the quill. So the right hand holds the thing being worked on, and the left hand holds the tool. This riddle gives us a window into the physical reality of medieval writing. It wasn't as simple as picking up a ballpoint pen. It was a craft that required tools and skill. The penknife was as essential as the ink and the quill itself. The line, "My purpose is to protect the softest skin," is a bit cryptic. It could mean protecting the vellum animal skin from a clumsy blunt quill, or it could be a more metaphorical way of saying it helps create the delicate letters on the page. We can see illustrations of scribes at work in medieval manuscripts, and they are often shown with a penknife in hand. The famous Eadwine Psalter from the 12th century contains a portrait of the monk Eadwine, who calls himself the Prince of Scribes, and he is depicted with his writing tools. The riddle personifies the knife as a companion. This speaks to the intimate relationship between a craftsperson and their tools. The scribes spent countless hours with their knife, quill, and ink. These were not just objects, they were extensions of their body and their will. The riddle is a small tribute to this silent, essential partner in the creation of every medieval book. But what were the other forgotten tools of the medieval scribe? What kinds of rulers, scrapers, and burnishers did they use to prepare their pages? How did the physical strain of this work affect their bodies over a lifetime? And can we ever truly understand a text without understanding the physical process that brought it into being? Number 2, what has a city without houses, a forest, without trees and water, without fish? This is a riddle of a different kind. It is not about a physical object. It is about a representation of the world. It describes a world with all its major features, but in an abstract, lifeless form. It's a puzzle about a map. The answer is a map. A map has cities marked on it, but no actual houses. It has forests depicted, often with a symbol, but no real trees. It has rivers and oceans, but no fish swimming in them. It is a perfect description of a symbolic representation of reality. Medieval maps were very different from our modern satellite-based maps. They were not always concerned with precise geographical accuracy. Many, like the famous Hereford Mappa Mundi from around 1300, were more like theological diagrams. They placed Jerusalem at the center of the world, with Asia at the top where the sun rises, the Orient, Europe to the left, and Africa to the right. The map was filled with illustrations of biblical events, strange beasts, and monstrous races from the far corners of the earth, as described by classical authors like Pliny the Elder. These maps were not primarily for navigation, they were for understanding the world in a spiritual and historical context. They were visual encyclopedias. A map like the Hereford Mappa Mundi was an object of contemplation, a way of seeing all of God's creation and all of human history laid out in a single image. There were also more practical maps called portolan charts, which were used by sailors in the Mediterranean from the 13th century onwards. These were incredibly accurate charts of coastlines, showing ports and rum lines for navigation. These maps were valuable trade secrets. The riddle, however, seems to be about the general concept of a map. It captures the strange, ghostly nature of a map. It shows everything, but it contains nothing. It is a world made of paper and ink. The riddle's author understands the difference between the symbol and the thing it represents. This is a highly sophisticated, abstract idea. It shows a mind capable of thinking about how we think about the world. But who was the audience for a riddle like this? Was it scholars familiar with geography and cartography? Or was the basic idea of a map common enough for anyone to solve it? How did the average medieval person, who might never travel more than 20 miles from their home, conceive of the shape of the world? And what other kinds of abstract thought are hidden in these simple sounding puzzles? Number 1, who are the two sisters who create the world each day? We are two sisters, one dark and one fair. We give birth to each other every day. One of us flees the other, but we can never escape. We rule the whole world together, but we can never meet. This is a grand final riddle. It's about the most fundamental rhythm of life. It uses the metaphor of a family, two sisters, to describe a cosmic process. The clues are about opposition, cycles, and a chase that never ends. The answer is day and night. They are two sisters, one fair, day, and one dark night. They give birth to each other. Night is born from the end of day, and day is born from the end of night. They are in a constant chase across the sky. They rule the whole world together, each taking their turn. But they can never meet except for the fleeting moments of dawn and dusk. This is a beautiful and powerful piece of poetry. It personifies the daily cycle of light and dark as a relationship between two immortal beings. This is one of the oldest forms of human myth-making found in cultures all over the world. The riddle taps into this primal understanding of the cosmos. For medieval people, the distinction between day and night was absolute. In daylight was for work, for travel, for life. The day was measured by the position of the sun and the ringing of church bells for the canonical hours of prayer, from matins before dawn to compline after sunset. The invention of the mechanical clock in the 13th and 14th centuries began to change this, but for most people, the sun was the only clock that mattered. Their night was a different world. It was a time of danger, both real and imagined. A time of crime, of fire, of supernatural threats, but it was also a time for rest, for storytelling, and for prayer. The rhythm of day and night dictated the rhythm of all human activity. This riddle is a perfect end to our journey because it deals with the most universal of all experiences. Every person who has ever lived has known these two sisters. The riddle's genius is in taking this common, everyday phenomenon and making us see it again for the first time as a dramatic, eternal story. It reminds us that the medieval world, for all its strangeness, was inhabited by people just like us, who looked up at the sky in wonder and tried to make sense of it all through stories and puzzles. But what specific myths and folklore did they tell about the figures of day and night? How did the changing length of the days through the seasons affect their mood and their culture in ways we, with our artificial light, can no longer feel? And after 1,000 years of scientific explanation, is there still a part of us that sees the dawn not as the rotation of the earth, but as the victory of the fair sister over the dark one?